Welcome back to another episode of Rock Boys Football. Brian Kelly, the LSU Tigers, heading into 2025, probably not the flashiest team to talk about going into the fall. You start looking at this depth chart, you start looking at the roster that they have going into spring practice, going into the fall, and say, there ain't many teams that you have more confidence with than LSU going into the 2025 year. And I think it starts with what they did in the offseason where they use the transfer portal a lot, and we all have that team in our mind that just grabs transfer portal players to grab them. Yeah, LSU grabbed a lot of players. One, they grabbed a lot of good football players, and I think most importantly, they grabbed really good football players at the positions they knew they needed to get better at going into the 2025 year. I don't think there's a team across the country, and certainly not in the SEC, that I think got better more than LSU over the last couple of weeks and months. There are four things that kind of jump out to me in terms of why I have confidence in this LSU team going into 2025. Want to get into those four reasons before we get into it, as always. To the LSU fans, number one, many of y'all have been rocking with the boys for the last couple of weeks and months. It was very fun talking this team in the transfer portal. The amount of support y'all continue to show to the fellas, it meant the world. Appreciate you guys. I had a blast talking this team in the portal. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel. And I know for a fact there are some LSU fans out there that think I am too high on LSU going into 2025. If that's the case, let it fly in the comment section. This is what February is about. And it's about some hot takes. It's about having some of these conversations as we get into spring practice. Appreciate you guys. Without further ado, let's get into it. Look, reason number one, experience at the quarterback position. There's going to be a lot of good quarterback play in the SEC, but there's going to be a lot of young quarterback play in the SEC. You look across the SEC landscape, if you will. You have some young up and comers. DJ Lagway, Lenore Sellers at South Carolina, Arch Manning at Texas, and then you look at some of the other kind of perennial SEC contenders, if you will. There are some real question marks at the quarterback spot. And you look at Georgia, they got a quarterback battle going into spring practice. You look at Alabama, they might be playing a true freshman at quarterback going into 2025. You look at Garrett Nussmeier coming back for one more year at LSU. And look, I think there are some improvements that can be made in Garrett Nussmeier's game. I have confidence that Joe Sloan can help him take that step. But you look across the country, who's the leading passer in college football that's coming back in the 2025 year from 2024? The answer is Garrett Nussmeier. I bet a lot of college football fans outside of the LSU fan base probably didn't know that. The most productive passer from the 2024 year that is returning to college football in 2025 is quarterback Garrett Nussmeier. And why does this kind of stick out to me? I'm going back and looking at the past national champions. Will Howard, multi-year starter at Kansas State before coming to Ohio State. J.J. McCarthy, 2-year starter before winning a national title with Michigan. You look at Stetson Bennett, multi-year starter, winning a national championship with Georgia. The last couple of quarterbacks that we've seen win national championships, they have starting experience under their belt going into the college football season. Garrett Nussmeier has that, where a lot of the other, national championship caliber teams, there's a lot of new quarterbacks getting broken in. And you look at Garrett Nussmeier, look, I think there are steps to be made. And I think one of the big storylines for LSU on offense is I think they are way better at wide receiver. I mean, you talk about one of the bigger disappointments, I think, for LSU in 2024 was, we were pretty high on the LSU wide receiver room going into 2024. We thought they would be able to, we knew it wasn't going to be Malik Neighbors and Brian Thomas, but we thought it was going to be pretty dang good. And it really wasn't, I guess you'd say. Chris Hilton Jr., guy that we had very high expectations for, just was kind of that non-factor. Obviously, injuries played a role. The two things that I look at for LSU's wide receiver room and say, why are they a better unit than they were in 2024? One, it's a more diverse set of skills. You got guys that can do a little bit of everything. You look at Nick Anderson, you look at Chris Hilton. Those are your vertical stretchers, right? Those are big bodies that can move really, really fast in a straight line that are going to kind of take the top off of defense. Then you look at guys like Barry Brown and Aaron Anderson, electric with the football in their hands. I mean, one of the things that really stands out to me about this LSU offense as a whole is it is fast. I mean, it's very clear that Brian Kelly and this LSU program wants to fill their offense with speed. And I don't blame them. Speed kills. If you have a very fast offense, you are hard to deal with. Barian Brown, he goes 10.49. Aaron Anderson was 10.7 in the 100-meter dash. Jelani Watkins like a 10.3. He burns. Obviously, Caden Durham burns too, coming out at the running back spot. Probably forgetting a few guys. There's a lot of speed on this LSU team. Harlan Berry, true freshman. He also can flat out cook. A lot of speed, a lot of playmaking ability. And then you add a guy like Trey'Dez Green at the tight end spot, who I would project is playing, a lot split out wide. I mean, that's just a unique unicorn pass catcher in terms of he can do a lot of different things. You don't see many big athletes like Trey'Dez Green that can move the way he does. I think Trey'Dez Green is going to be a massive factor, especially in the red zone for LSU. So you got a quarterback that's returning for another year that we are confident that Joe Sloan can work with and get better. You got pass catchers that I think are significantly better than they were in 2024. The real question we have to answer on this LSU offense is the offensive line, which is going to be probably the biggest storyline going into spring practice. How does this offensive line shake out? We're going to do a deeper dive into that in a couple of days. Look, LSU's done a really good job, one, developing offensive linemen. Number two, did a good job in the transfer portal, grabbing some plug-and-play guys. And they got some young cats coming in. And a guy like Carius Kern, I'd be very surprised if he does not start year one for LSU. And so you lose a lot of really good offensive linemen. I don't think the drop-off is going to be as big as the national media is probably going to assume. And here's one thing that you might be excited about is, as good as that LSU offensive line was in pass protection, I mean, you had legit NFL tackles, a very, very good offensive line in pass pro. Probably didn't run the football as well as I think a lot of LSU fans expected. You got some bigger bodies coming in. Could LSU maybe get a little bit more of a run game on offense in 2025? That would do wonders for Garrett Nussmeier's play. So we'll kind of keep an eye on the offensive line. It's probably the biggest question mark, but I do think there are more answers than people realize on the offensive line because Brian Kelly's done a really good job stacking talent in that room. Defensive side of the football. And I think probably the bigger question mark here, right? I think there's a lot, even if you ain't an LSU fan, you look at that offense and say, look, it's hard to argue they're not going to be a good offense. You got a quarterback that you trust. You got a ton of playmakers on the outside. Can this LSU defense take another step? They took a step in the 2024 season, unquestionably. I think Coach Baker's doing a very good job. Here's what excites me, number one, year two. Year two defensive coordinators, they consistently get better. You look at Jim Knowles at Ohio State. You look at Jesse Minter, what he did at Michigan a couple years ago. How about the Texas Longhorns defense? Consistently getting better under the same defensive coordinator. Heck, I think the best example is Coach Blake Baker at Missouri. Coach Blake Baker's first year at Missouri in 2022 gave up almost 28 points per game. That number in 2023, year two with that Missouri defense, it was cut down to 20. Year two, just with guys that are more comfortable with what Coach Blake Baker wants to do on defense, it's hard to see this LSU defense not taking a step because guys are just more comfortable with what they're doing. It was a little bit of you could tell these guys were a little bit, I don't know if the right word is confused at times, but it was an adjustment period. You were probably thinking a lot on defense, not necessarily playing and reacting. Year two, you see a lot more of, hey, we know what we're doing. We know what our job is. We can go play a little bit faster and be playmakers. Number four, look, are you better at every position on defense? I think specifically in the secondary. Look, in my opinion, you look at the Coach Blake Baker defense, it is pretty reliant on having a strong secondary, where LSU just simply – they weren't there from a personnel standpoint in the 2024 year. Coach Baker wants to bring some heat, wants to bring some pressure. He's going to at times ask his defensive backs, safeties and cornerbacks to hold up in man coverage. They straight up didn't have the guys last year. Mansour Delane coming in, one of the best cornerbacks in the portal. Jakeem Jackson, very, very high ceiling, a guy that actually started the year at Florida and then got banged up, a guy that, look, we say this a lot. Corey Raymond recruited Jakeem Jackson at Florida, recruited him out of the portal to LSU. You don't recruit a player twice if you don't like him. I have a good feeling Corey Raymond likes Jakeem Jackson. DJ Pickett's coming in, who I think is going to be a guy that plays in some capacity as a freshman. The secondary, from a personnel standpoint, it's infinitely better. And that was the position that I thought was most notably not good enough in the 2024 year. Linebacker room should be awesome. And then on the defensive line, this is probably where you could make the argument that are we really better at the edge rusher position? You know, Braden Swinson and Savion Jones in 2024 on the low. Braden Swinson, we knew was a dude coming out of the 2023 year, was a guy for LSU in 2024. Savion Jones, we were kind of waiting to break out. He broke out in that back half of the 2024 year, played some very good football for LSU. You do use the transfer portal and replace some of that production. Not only Patrick Payton, Jack Pyburn, Jamari Butler, but you got some young guys, Cobbins, Gabriel Relaford, like those guys I think can play. And so I don't think it's crazy to say at the very least you're holding serve in the edge rusher category. Then on the inside, you don't make any transfer portal additions outside of Sadir Mitchell, who again, Bo Davis recruited at Texas, recruited back to LSU, probably likes him. You just get better. You know, Dominic McKinley going into year two, Mod Bro going into year two. The development of some talented football players that showed they could play as freshmen, you're going to be better at that position than you were last year. And I'm interested to see if LSU maybe makes an addition in the spring transfer portal window at that position, because it's really the only question I have is, are we good enough on the inside and are we deep enough? This LSU team, it's not as flashy because they don't have a DJ Lagway quarterback or Lenore Sellers. This team got better. And it was already a solid team in 2024. This was not a bad football team. They knew there were some things they needed to do to take that next step. I think they did those things in the transfer portal. That's what stands out to me. Fire me up for LSU. It's going to be, you almost call them a dark horse because nobody's really talking about them. You know, people are talking about Florida and South Carolina and rightfully Texas, rightfully so. Those are going to be good football teams in the 2025 year. This LSU team is going to be dang good too. We'll cut it there. Appreciate you guys rocking with it. If y'all do enjoy the content, consider subscribing to the channel, and we'll talk to y'all later.